Marcus Wilson sat on the cold concrete steps of the downtown library, his worn jacket pulled tight against the autumn wind, staring at the half-eaten peanut butter sandwich in his trembling hands. He had exactly $12 left to his name, 3 days until his next paycheck, and a 7-year-old daughter waiting for him at after-school care who believed her daddy could fix anything. But right now, Marcus couldn't even fix himself. The sandwich felt heavy in his palm, not because of its weight, but because it represented a choice he never thought he'd have to make. Eat now and have nothing for tomorrow, or save it and let the gnawing hunger continue its relentless assault on his empty stomach. As he sat there contemplating this impossible decision, a small figure appeared at the edge of his vision, a girl no older than 8, with tears streaming down her face and a loneliness in her eyes that mirrored his own shattered heart. If you believe in the power of kindness, in second chances, and in the beautiful moments that can change lives forever, please hit that like button, leave a comment sharing your thoughts, and subscribe to this channel. Your support helps us share more stories that remind us of the goodness in this world. Marcus noticed the girl immediately because she carried the same defeated posture he saw in the mirror every morning. She sat down 3 steps below him, her designer backpack looking absurdly expensive against the backdrop of her obvious distress. She was crying quietly, the kind of crying that comes from deep within, the kind that adults do when they think no one is watching. Her small shoulders shook with each suppressed sob, and she kept wiping her eyes with the sleeve of her pristine school uniform, trying desperately to compose herself but failing with each new wave of emotion. He knew he should mind his own business. Everyone in this city did. That was the unspoken rule of urban survival: keep your head down, ignore the suffering around you, protect yourself first. Marcus had learned that lesson the hard way over the past 2 years, ever since his wife Sarah died suddenly from an aneurysm, leaving him alone with their daughter Emma and a mountain of medical debt that had consumed their savings, their home, and nearly their hope. He had gone from being a successful graphic designer to working 3 part-time jobs just to keep Emma fed and housed in their tiny studio apartment. Pride had become a luxury he could no longer afford, and kindness toward strangers seemed like an indulgence reserved for people who weren't one missed shift away from homelessness. But something about this little girl stopped him. Maybe it was the way she clutched a photograph in her small hand, staring at it between sobs. Maybe it was the fact that despite her expensive clothes and fancy backpack, she looked just as lost and alone as he felt. Maybe it was simply that Marcus, despite everything life had thrown at him, still remembered what it felt like to be human, to see suffering and want to do something about it, no matter how small. Marcus cleared his throat gently. The girl looked up, startled, her eyes red and swollen. She couldn't have been more than 8 years old, with dark braids and a face that would have been cheerful under different circumstances. She immediately tried to hide her tears, straightening her back and wiping her face quickly, the way children do when they're trying to be brave. He didn't say anything at first. Instead, Marcus carefully tore his sandwich in half, the peanut butter stretching between the 2 pieces before finally separating. He had been hungry before, desperately hungry, but he had also been the recipient of kindness when he needed it most, and he knew that sometimes a simple gesture could mean the difference between giving up and holding on for one more day. He extended one half toward the girl, his hand steady despite the tremor of hunger and exhaustion that ran through his body. The girl stared at the offered sandwich, then at Marcus, her expression confused and cautious. For a long moment, she didn't move, and Marcus wondered if he had overstepped, if he had frightened her, if his disheveled appearance and unshaven face made him look like someone her parents had warned her about. But then her stomach growled audibly in the quiet afternoon air, and something in her face crumbled. Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks as she slowly reached out and accepted the sandwich with both hands, holding it like it was something precious. They sat in silence for a while, both eating slowly, both lost in their own worlds of pain and struggle. Marcus learned, through her halting words between bites, that her name was Sophie. She had been waiting for her mother, who was supposed to pick her up from school 3 hours ago. This wasn't the first time it had happened, and Sophie's voice carried the weight of accumulated disappointments, of birthday parties missed, of school plays attended by nannies instead of parents, of promises broken so many times that hope itself had become painful. Marcus listened, really listened, in the way that only someone who truly understands loneliness can listen to another lonely soul. He told her about Emma, about how hard it was to be both mother and father to a little girl who deserved so much more than their current circumstances could provide. He told her about the juggling act of his 3 jobs, about falling asleep on the bus between shifts, about the constant fear that one mistake, one illness, one unexpected expense would send their fragile existence tumbling down like a house of cards. What Marcus didn't know was that standing in the shadow of the library entrance, just out of sight, was a woman who had stopped dead in her tracks the moment she saw a stranger sharing food with her daughter. Catherine Morrison, CEO of Morrison Digital Solutions, one of the fastest growing tech companies in the state, had been rushing from yet another meeting that had run overtime, her phone clutched in her hand, her mind already racing through the next crisis that demanded her attention. She had been about to call out to Sophie, about to offer another excuse and another empty promise, when she saw the scene unfolding on the steps. Catherine watched as this stranger, this man whose clothes were worn and whose face showed the deep lines of struggle and hardship, gave away what was clearly his only food to comfort her crying daughter. She watched as he listened to Sophie with genuine attention, without checking his phone, without the distraction and divided focus that had become Catherine's defining characteristic as a parent. She watched as her daughter, her beautiful, neglected daughter, opened up to this kind stranger in a way she hadn't opened up to Catherine in months, maybe years. The realization hit Catherine like a physical blow. She had been so consumed by building her empire, by proving herself in a male-dominated industry, by securing her daughter's financial future, that she had completely failed to secure Sophie's present. She had justified her absence with the promise of future stability, with the assurance that all this sacrifice would be worth it someday, that Sophie would understand when she was older. But watching her daughter accept half a sandwich from a stranger with more gratitude than she had shown Catherine in recent memory, Catherine understood with devastating clarity that she had gotten everything backward. The conversation on the steps continued, and Catherine heard Marcus talking about the small joys that kept him going, Emma's laugh when he did silly voices reading bedtime stories, the way she drew pictures of superheroes that always somehow looked like him, the fierce hugs she gave him every morning before school as if she was trying to transfer her own strength into his exhausted body. He spoke about his daughter with a richness of detail and depth of presence that made Catherine realize she couldn't remember the last time she had really looked at Sophie, really seen her, really been present enough to know what made her daughter laugh or cry or dream. Marcus checked his watch, an old digital thing with a cracked face, and sighed. He needed to get to his evening shift at the warehouse, but he seemed reluctant to leave Sophie alone. He asked her gently if her mother was coming, if there was someone he could call. Sophie shook her head, saying her mother was probably just stuck in another important meeting, that she was used to waiting, that it was fine. But the way she said it, the resignation in her young voice, suggested it was anything but fine. That was when Catherine finally stepped forward, her heels clicking on the concrete, her perfectly tailored suit and confident stride masking the emotional devastation happening inside her. Both Marcus and Sophie looked up, and Catherine saw her daughter's expression shift from surprise to something harder to define. Not quite joy, not quite indifference, but something sadly in between. Marcus stood immediately, and Catherine could see him mentally preparing to defend himself, perhaps expecting accusations or anger for talking to someone's child. But Catherine surprised them both. With tears forming in her own eyes, tears she hadn't allowed herself to shed in years of corporate battles and personal sacrifices, she approached Marcus and did something she rarely did anymore. She spoke from her heart instead of her head. She thanked him. Simply, genuinely, profoundly thanked him for showing her daughter kindness when kindness was what Sophie needed most. She thanked him for being present in a moment when she, Sophie's own mother, had failed once again to show up. She thanked him for the sandwich, for the conversation, for the reminder that money and success and corner offices meant absolutely nothing if you lost sight of what truly mattered. Marcus looked uncomfortable with the gratitude, shuffling his feet and insisting he had only done what anyone would do, though they both knew that wasn't true. Not in this city. Not anymore. Catherine asked his name, asked about his circumstances, and as the pieces of his story came together, something shifted in her expression. She had been looking for a creative director for her company's expanding design division, someone with experience and talent but also with the kind of resilience and character that couldn't be taught or faked. She saw in Marcus not just a skilled professional fallen on hard times, but someone whose values aligned with the kind of company she suddenly realized she wanted to build. If this story has touched your heart, if it's reminded you of what really matters in life, Please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and let us know in the comments how this story made you feel. Your engagement helps these messages of hope and human connection reach more people. Catherine made Marcus an offer right there on those library steps, an offer for a position that would not only match his previous salary but exceed it, with benefits that would erase his medical debt and provide stability for Emma. She made this offer not out of pity, but out of recognition of the kind of person who gives away his last meal to comfort a crying child, the kind of person any organization would be fortunate to have. Marcus stood there, stunned, unable to process the sudden reversal of his fortune. He had spent so long fighting just to survive each day that the possibility of actually thriving again seemed impossible to comprehend. But as he looked at Sophie, who was smiling for the first time since he'd seen her, and at Catherine, whose own transformation was evident in her face, he understood that this moment was real, that kindness had created a connection that would change all their lives. Before we end this story, we want to hear from you. Comment below. Kindness matters, if you believe that small acts of compassion can create big changes. Let's flood the comments with positivity and remind each other that we're all connected in this human experience. In the weeks and months that followed, Marcus would join Morrison Digital Solutions and transform their creative division with his talent and work ethic. But more importantly, Catherine would transform her own life, learning from Marcus's example what it meant to truly be present for your child. She restructured her schedule, set boundaries around her work, and began showing up not just financially for Sophie but emotionally, physically, spiritually. The two families became close, Emma and Sophie becoming inseparable friends, and Marcus and Catherine developing a deep mutual respect and eventually a profound friendship built on shared values and second chances. That afternoon on the library steps, when a struggling single father shared his last sandwich with a lonely little girl, neither of them knew that a powerful CEO was watching, learning, and changing. They didn't know that one moment of simple human kindness would ripple outward, transforming multiple lives and reminding everyone involved that success without compassion is empty, that wealth without connection is poverty of a different kind, and that sometimes the most powerful thing we can offer another person is not our money or our influence, but simply our presence, our attention, and half of whatever we have to give.